Imagine a world where we never lost a single page of ancient knowledge. A world where the cures for diseases, the blueprints of forgotten machines, and the philosophies of lost civilizations were all preserved in one place. Now imagine that place actually existed, and we let it burn. The Library of Alexandria was the greatest collection of human knowledge ever assembled. But what if it never burned? What if every scroll, every manuscript, every secret of the ancient world survived to this day? How different would our world be? Before we explore what could have been, let's understand what was lost. The Library of Alexandria was founded around 283 BC in Egypt under the reign of Ptolemy II. It wasn't just a library. It was the world's first university, research center, and think tank all rolled into one. At its peak, it held between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls. To put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of roughly 100,000 modern books. Scholars from every corner of the known world came here: mathematicians, astronomers, doctors, poets, philosophers. Euclid wrote his Elements of Geometry here. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth here, and he was accurate to within 2%. Archimedes may have studied here. Herophilus performed the first systematic dissections of the human body here, discovering the nervous system. The library had a rule: every ship that docked in Alexandria's harbor had to surrender its books. Scribes would copy them, and sometimes they kept the originals and gave back the copies. Knowledge was that valuable? But over centuries, through wars, fires, political neglect, and religious conflicts, the library was destroyed. Not in one dramatic fire, as Hollywood would have you believe, but slowly, painfully, piece by piece. By the time the last remnants were gone around the 7th century AD, humanity had lost an immeasurable treasure. So what if none of that ever happened? What if the Library of Alexandria survived to this day? Let's start with the biggest consequence. The Dark Ages might never have happened, or at least they wouldn't have been so dark. When the Roman Empire fell in the 5th century AD, Europe plunged into centuries of intellectual stagnation. The knowledge of the Greeks and Romans was scattered. Monks preserved fragments in monasteries, but so much was lost. It took nearly 1,000 years for Europe to rediscover what the ancients already knew. We call this rediscovery the Renaissance. But if the Library of Alexandria survived, that knowledge was never lost in the first place. Think about what that means. The works of Hero of Alexandria, who invented a primitive steam engine called the Aeolipile in the 1st century AD, would have been studied, improved, and potentially industrialized centuries before James Watt. We're talking about a possible industrial revolution happening in the 5th or 6th century instead of the 18th. Eratosthenes had already proven the Earth was round and calculated its size. With that knowledge preserved and built upon, the age of exploration could have started 1,000 years earlier. Columbus sailed in 1492, but in this alternate timeline, ships could have been crossing the Atlantic by the 5th century. And medicine. Galen's medical texts dominated European medicine for over 1,000 years, but many of his ideas were wrong. If the more advanced anatomical work done at Alexandria had survived, we might have had modern surgery by the medieval period. Diseases like the Black Plague, which killed a third of Europe in the 14th century, might have been understood and contained far sooner. The compounding effect of preserved knowledge is staggering. Every discovery builds on the last. Losing 1,000 years of progress didn't just delay us by 1,000 years. It may have delayed us by several thousand. Now let's talk about something more controversial: religion. The Library of Alexandria contained texts from every major belief system of the ancient world. Egyptian mysticism, Greek philosophy, Zoroastrianism, early Judaism, Babylonian mythology, and countless others we've never even heard of because they were lost. If these texts survived, our understanding of the origins of modern religions would be radically different. Scholars believe that many ideas in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism were influenced by earlier traditions. With the original source materials intact, we would be able to trace exactly how ideas like the afterlife, the soul, heaven and hell, and monotheism evolved over thousands of years. This doesn't mean religion wouldn't exist, but it might look very different. Religious debates would be grounded in a much richer historical context. Some religions might have never formed at all. Others might have merged. The philosophical traditions of Stoicism, Epicureanism, and Neoplatonism might have remained dominant intellectual forces instead of being overshadowed. And here's a thought-provoking question. The library contained the complete works of hundreds of philosophers we've never read. We only have fragments of Heraclitus, Democritus, and the pre-Socratic thinkers. What if their complete ideas contained insights that would have changed the course of human thought? We will never know. Unless, of course, the library had survived. If the scientific revolution happened 1,000 years earlier, where would we be today? Let's do some rough math. The modern computer was invented in the 1940s, roughly 200 years after the Industrial Revolution began. If the Industrial Revolution started in the 6th century, we could have had computing technology by the 8th century. By the year 1000 AD, we might have had the internet. By the 1200s, artificial intelligence. Now, obviously this is speculative. History doesn't progress in a straight line. Wars, plagues, and political upheaval can slow things down. But the core principle holds. Knowledge accelerates progress, and losing knowledge decelerates it. Consider this. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, is an ancient analog computer built around 100 BC. It could predict eclipses and track the movements of the planets. It was so advanced that nothing comparable was built for another 1,400 years. If the knowledge behind this device had been preserved and developed, the trajectory of technology would be unrecognizable to us. In a world where the Library of Alexandria survived, we might already be colonizing other star systems. We might have cured every known disease. We might have solved energy, hunger, and poverty centuries ago. Or we might have destroyed ourselves. Because technology without wisdom is a dangerous thing. And that brings us to our final point. Not everything about a surviving Library of Alexandria would be positive. More advanced technology means more advanced weapons. If gunpowder, nuclear physics, or biological weapons were discovered centuries earlier, the wars of the ancient and medieval world could have been apocalyptic. The Roman Empire with nuclear weapons is a terrifying thought. And then there's the question of power. Knowledge is power, and the Library of Alexandria was controlled by a small elite. The Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt used it as a tool of soft power. If the library survived, whoever controlled it would have had an enormous advantage over the rest of the world. This could have led to a single empire dominating the globe far earlier than any colonial power did in our timeline. History teaches us that concentrated knowledge often leads to concentrated power, and concentrated power often leads to oppression. So perhaps the destruction of the library, as tragic as it was, served as a kind of reset. It forced humanity to rediscover knowledge on its own terms, in many different places, through many different cultures. The decentralization of knowledge may have been messy and slow, but it also made it more democratic. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is one of history's greatest tragedies. We will never know exactly what was lost. But perhaps the real lesson isn't about what we lost. It's about what we do with what we have now.